Welcome to episode 209 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It is May 28, 1888, and today, in the east end of Glasgow, a new football club finally plays football. The club is Celtic. Its ground is the newly built Celtic Park, just off Dalmarnock Street. Not the great cathedral of football we know today, but the first Celtic Park, a hastily raised enclosure built by volunteers, debt, ambition, and community purpose. The opponent is Rangers, and the score is Celtic 5, Rangers 2. Afterwards, the players and officials don't separate into hostile camps. They don't leave behind police lines, newspaper fury, and tribal recrimination. They go indoors. They eat supper. They listen to music. They make speeches. They toast one another's health, because nobody in that room knows what history will later call this match, the first Old Firm. But how did we get here? To understand May 28, 1888, we need two stories running side by side. One is the history of football becoming organized. The other is the story of Irish Catholic Scotland finding a football voice. We start with the game itself. In the 1850s and 60s, football is still being shaped. Different schools and clubs play different versions. The Football Association is formed in England in 1863, and the rules begin to settle. Clubs form, friendlies multiply. Football starts moving from recreation into institution. Across the border, Scotland develops in its own way. Queen's Park, founded in 1867, becomes the great pioneer club of Scottish football. It joins the Football Association, enters the early FA Cup, and helps connect Scottish football to the English game. But travel is expensive, fixtures are difficult, and Scotland needs its own structure. So in 1873, the Scottish Football Association is formed, the Scottish Cup follows, and Queen's Park becomes its first dominant force. And already by then, international football exists. Scotland and England meet in 1872 at Hamilton Crescent in Glasgow, the first official international match. The score is 0-0, but the significance is huge. It is not just England against Scotland. It is a developing football culture against another developing football culture. The English game is often associated with dribbling, individual rushes, physical momentum, men carrying the ball forward by force and skill. The Scottish game becomes associated with combination, with passing, movement, and collective intelligence. That contrast can be exaggerated, but as a footballing idea, it matters. By the 1870s and 80s, football is not merely being codified, it is being argued over. What should the game look like? Who should control it? How should it be played? How should clubs compete? And Rangers are born into that world. Founded in 1872, they become part of the developing Glasgow football scene. Cups, friendlies, local rivalries, exhibition matches, and that increasingly familiar Victorian football pattern, ambition without yet having a lead. By the 1880s, the game is bigger than its structure. England has the FA Cup. Scotland has the Scottish Cup. There are internationals, local cups, charity matches, and even those grand Championship of the World fixtures between English and Scottish Cup winners. And then, in March 1888, William McGregor writes the letter we covered back in episode 122. McGregor, an Aston Villa director, has had enough of fixture chaos. Clubs need predictable games. Crowds need habits. Professional football needs a calendar. His letter leads to the Football League, which begins in England later in 1888. Scotland's league will follow in 1890. So by May 1888, football is right on the edge of becoming modern. But that is only half the story. The other half begins with famine, migration, poverty, identity, and charity. After the Great Famine, large numbers of Irish migrants settle in Scotland. In Edinburgh, they gather around the Cowgate area, known to many as Little Ireland. And in 1875, Hibernian Football Club is formed, rooted in the Irish Catholic community. Even the name carries the meaning. Hibernia, the Latin name for Ireland. Hibernian becomes more than a club. It becomes proof of concept. A football club can raise money. A football club can create pride. A football club can gather a scattered community around something visible, organized, and joyful. And in Glasgow, Brother Walfrid is watching. Born Andrew Cairns in County Sligo, Brother Walfrid is a married brother working among poor Irish immigrant families in Glasgow's East End. His concern is not trophies. It's hunger. It's deprivation. It's the poor children's dinner table. But he understands what Hibernian has shown. Football can feed people. Football can build institutions. Football can give an Irish Catholic working class community a public life in a city where social and religious tensions are real. So on November 6, 1887, a meeting is held at St. Mary's Church Hall in the Colton district of Glasgow. The purpose is practical and charitable. Establish a football club to raise money for poor children and families. Several names are discussed. Glasgow Hibernian, Emeralds, others that would lean heavily into the Irish model. But Brother Walfrid insists on Celtic, not Celtic, as in an exotic sporting brand. Celtic, a name meant to bridge Scotland and Ireland, a club born in Glasgow from Irish roots for a community trying to survive and belong. But a club needs a team, and a team needs a ground. And that is where 1888 becomes decisive. Glasgow is hosting the International Exhibition of Science, Art and Industry. The city is in a moment of display and construction. Crowds are coming. Attention is coming. And Celtic's founders want a ground ready quickly. The first Celtic Park is built near Dalmarnock Street, close to where the modern Celtic Park now stands. It's not luxurious, but it's functional. A pitch, basic facilities, a pavilion, and enough of an enclosure to take gate money. It opens on May 8, 1888, the same day as the exhibition, with Hibernian playing cowlares. And 20 days later, Celtic finally play their own first match. But why Rangers? The best answer is probably not prophecy. There's no evidence that anyone thought, let's inaugurate one of the defining rivalries of world football. Rangers were local. They had name value. The season was late. Celtic needed an attractive opponent, and Rangers could provide a side, even if it was not necessarily the full first choice Rangers team. It was, in other words, a sensible friendly. But history turned it into something else. Celtic wear white shirts with green collars, with a Celtic cross badge on the chest. The crowd is around 2,000. Rangers begin with the wind and push early. Celtic's goalkeeper, Michael Dolan, and the backs have work to do. Then Celtic attack. Mick Dunbar places a corner into the danger area, and Neil McCallum heads it in. That is the first goal in Celtic history. Not merely the first goal against Rangers, the first Celtic goal, full stop. Rangers respond through Suter 1-1. The match is lively, open, and by contemporary accounts, played in a friendly spirit. Rangers goalkeeper Nicol is busy. Later retellings give him moments of real resistance. The safer contemporary picture is simple enough. He's saving in grand style, because Celtic are creating chances. Before halftime, another Dunbar corner causes trouble, and James Kelly scores. Celtic lead 2-1. After the interval, Rangers try to use the wind and restart with purpose. But Celtic keep the ball low, pass their way forward, and the Maley family enters the story. Tom Maley scores Celtic's third. Suter answers again for Rangers, 3-2. A proper match now, but Celtic finish stronger. Tom Maley scores again, then again. A hat-trick on Celtic's first day. A sixth Celtic goal is put through, but disallowed for offside. So final score, Celtic 5, Rangers 2. And then comes the part that feels almost impossible from a modern distance. After the match, the clubs gather together. At St. Mary's Hall, close to where Celtic had been founded, there's supper, a concert, speeches, toasts. Men from Celtic, Rangers, Hibernian, and the wider football world share the evening. Dr. John Conway chairs proceedings. Brother Walfrid is there. Officials speak, and goodwill is exchanged. This is not hatred. This is football society. This is a new club being welcomed into the Glasgow game. But so what? What they have just played is the first Old Firm. But the phrase itself is not born that night. No one leaves St. Mary's Hall saying, "We have just witnessed the Old Firm." The name comes later, and its origin is slightly contested. One version says it came from an early description of Celtic and Rangers as being like two old firm friends. That fits the tone of the first meaning, but the stronger, better documented explanation points to 1904. Before the 1904 Scottish Cup final between Celtic and Rangers, the football periodical The Scottish Referee published a satirical cartoon. In it, an old man carries a sandwich board reading, "Patronize the old firm, Rangers, Celtic Limited." That tells you what the phrase originally meant. Firm, as in business firm, not just two clubs, a commercial machine. By the early 1900s, Celtic and Rangers had become Scottish football's great box office pairing. Rivals, yes, but also mutually profitable rivals. Their meetings drew crowds, attention, gate money, newspaper copy, and public obsession. The cartoon was poking fun at the idea that, whatever they claimed on the pitch, the two clubs were also partners in a huge lucrative football economy. So the first match is in 1888, but the name, Old Firm, belongs more safely to the early 1900s, and especially to that 1904 cartoon. That matters, because rivalries are not always born as rivalries. Sometimes they begin as fixtures. Then money enters, then trophies enter, then identity enters, then memory enters, and then the fixture becomes a battlefield for everything that has accumulated around it. For Celtic, the first Celtic Park becomes a happy hunting ground. In 4 years there, the club grows rapidly. It attracts players, crowds, attention, and success. Celtic barely lose there. The new club is no longer a charitable idea with a pitch. It's becoming a power. And then the landlord notices. The original rent is about £50 a year. Once Celtic's success is obvious, the rent demand rises dramatically to about £450. That's not negotiation. That's an eviction strategy by another name. Celtic refuse to be trapped. They move a short distance away and build a new, bigger Celtic Park. The phrase attached to that move becomes perfect, from the graveyard to paradise. The landlord thinks he has exploited Celtic's success. Instead, he has pushed Celtic into building the stage on which the club will become enormous. The relationship with Rangers also changes. For years, the rivalry is competitive, but not yet the fully sectarian, tribal, mutually defining force it becomes later. Rangers, in their early decades, are not founded as an anti-Catholic institution. The hard religious and political lines develop over time. The early 20th century matters. In 1902, disaster strikes at Ibrox when a stand collapses during Scotland against England. 25 people die, hundreds are injured, and Rangers face enormous financial pressure to rebuild. To raise money, the club sells players. Celtic take advantage. That's the more careful phrase. Not melodrama, not conspiracy, but football opportunism. Celtic strengthen, Rangers weaken. Celtic wins 6 league titles in a row from 1905 to 1910. The rivalry becomes more serious because the stakes are now direct: money, recruitment, trophies, and dominance. And the social divide hardens too. Celtic increasingly represent the Irish Catholic immigrant experience in Glasgow, the memory of famine, migration, exclusion, parish life, and political connection to Ireland. Rangers increasingly draw identity from the Protestant, Unionist, and British side of Glasgow's culture. Those identities are not created by one match in 1888. They are layered into the fixture over decades. And once that happens, Celtic against Rangers is no longer just sport. It becomes a way for Glasgow to argue with itself. Over the years, the old firm gives Scottish football some of its most famous and infamous days. The 1909 Scottish Cup final, abandoned after crowd disorder, and supporters believe the clubs and authorities are engineering another lucrative replay. The 1957 League Cup final, when Celtic beat Rangers 7-1, still one of the most astonishing scores in the history of the rivalry. The 1971 Ibrox disaster, when 66 Rangers supporters die after an Old Firm match, a reminder that some moments in this rivalry are not sporting folklore, but human tragedy. The 1980 Scottish Cup final riot at Hampden. The 1989 shock of Mo Johnston signing for Rangers after previously playing for Celtic, a transfer that felt less like a football move and more like a cultural earthquake. And then the long eras of dominance. Celtic's 9 in a row from 1966 to 74. Rangers 9 in a row from 1989 to 97. Celtic's modern run after Rangers' financial collapse and lower division restart. Another 9 in a row from 2012 to 2020. And even now, in the season just completed, the story remains stubbornly alive. Hearts came painfully close to breaking the pattern, minutes from glory, but Celtic scored late, beat Hearts on the final day, and won the Scottish title again, their 14th league championship in 15 seasons. It is still more than 40 years since a non-Old Firm club won the Scottish League, Aberdeen, 1985. That is the scale of the duopoly. And yet the most poetic statistic is this. If you count only the major competitive meetings, Celtic and Rangers are almost impossibly level. Hundreds of matches, generations of players, empires built and rebuilt, disasters, riots, finals, titles, songs, banners, politics, grief and glory, and the ledger still refuses to choose. From that first 5-2 in 1888 to more than a century of football argument, the Old Firm remains Scotland's most powerful sporting institution. But it began with supper. It began with toasts. It began with a friendly match at a new ground built to feed poor children. Before we go, 3 things to take away from May 28, 1888. First, clubs are born from communities before they are born from trophies. Celtic's first match only makes sense if you understand Brother Walfrid, Hibernian, Irish Glasgow, and the charitable purpose behind the club. Second, rivalries are not born fully formed. Celtic and Rangers did not begin as eternal enemies. The rivalry hardened through success, money, recruitment, religion, politics, and the social history of Glasgow. Third, football history loves accidental beginnings. Nobody at Dalmarnock Street that day knew they were watching the first Old Firm. They thought they were watching Celtic's first game. History did the rest. On this day in 1888, Celtic played their first ever match, beat Rangers 5-2 at the first Celtic Park, then joined their opponents for supper, music, speeches and toasts, a friendly beginning to what would become one of the fiercest, most consequential, and most evenly balanced rivalries in world football. That is all for episode 209 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, leave a rating, and share it with a fellow football historian. If you have a story you want me to chase, you can always reach me at otd@17lawsguy.com. Tomorrow, we go to May 29, 1958, and the origin of why certain clubs and national teams wear one or more stars above the crest on their jerseys. You'll never look at a badge the same way again. See you then.